Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Hagee. I'm the Executive Director here with the Electrical Association of Philadelphia. And of course, joining me today is my colleague, Matt Dybert, our Program Manager, and our presenter from EATON, Eric Mejia. Eric Mejia. I got it wrong. Now I wanted to get that right.
Mejia.
Oh, I still didn't get it right. Eric Mejia. Right. Thank you. Before we do get started, of course, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Billows Electric Supply. Their consistent sponsorship has helped us offer these sessions out for free. So thank you, Billows. Of course, as if you've done this before, you know the deal. We cannot see you, we cannot hear you, but we still, of course, want those questions to come through. So go ahead and use the chat feature. We will field questions towards the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to walk us through the dangers of the gray market. Thank you, Eric.
You're very welcome, and thank you everyone for joining today and Billows. So the presentation we got going on today is countering the gray market circuit breakers, how to protect your customers, your people, but most importantly, your business. My current role is the distributor sales rep within the Philly market, and POA is one thing that I lead the initiative with. So let me go ahead. So what I'll be talking about in these upcoming slides will be the definitions, characteristics, and the risk associated with the gray market. And for those of you who are not familiar with the gray market, you'd ask yourself, well, what is the gray market? So the gray market is where the resale of genuine products occurs through the means of an unauthorized party. So it could be certain breaker brokers or an authorized distributor. And for example, what we see this on a daily basis. So you may encounter people selling these name brands like Nike, Adidas, let's say Louis Vuitton on the streets, but selling it as a authentic when knowingly it's not authentic. So some of the characteristics and the risks that come with the gray market, products are being sourced and sold as new surplus without the approval of the manufacturer. So in this case, it would be EATON, with no support or warranty whatsoever. So that's something that I want you to be aware of as well. So if you're purchasing one of these counterfeit breakers from an unauthorized distributor or seller, there is no warranty with that breaker. Also, gray market goods may be acquired through a means of outside authorized distribution channel. So that's another aspect where you may run across some risk. Also, some used, refurbished, surplus, or even counterfeit product is frequently misrepresented as new or a genuine product. So you may ask yourself, where could this happen? So a good scenario may be a hurricane hit one of these commercial centers where all these these circuit breakers were being utilized. And what happens is people would go ahead and grab these breakers, and what they do is that they change the internal parts, they clean it, they make it look like it's brand new, they, in quote, repurpose it, refurbish it, and they label it as a brand new circuit breaker, and then that's the product that would go on to the market unbeknownst to the contractor or end user that's buying it. They think it's a brand new breaker when in reality it got refurbished from a commercial center that got hit by a hurricane or a flood. So I just want you to be aware of that. Also, last and not least, but authorized resellers are susceptible to counterfeit products, knowingly or unknowingly. So that's a very gray area as well. But in the next slide, what I'll do is I'll talk about some of the risk and characteristics of a counterfeit and define what counterfeit is. So what is a counterfeit? And for our sole purpose, since we're talking about circuit breakers, it is an imitation of a circuit breaker that is fraudulently or deceptively passed as new or genuine. And you may ask yourself, well, what are the risks associated with buying counterfeits? Well, knockoffs, common with accessories and clothing, just how I mentioned earlier, is prevalent, but now with electrical products as well. So also, it may be manufactured as fake or refurbished genuine products with counterfeit packaging, marks, or labeling. So what we're seeing is that it might be a counterfeit breaker and the labeling looks like it's legitimate when in reality it's not, because these guys are getting very good at their craft of counterfeiting. Also, counterfeits are very unsafe electrical products, specifically when it comes to circuit breakers or any other electronic products, because it poses an increased risk for our channel partners, our contractors, and very importantly, our end users. Also, unauthorized resellers are susceptible to counter products, like I mentioned before, knowingly or unknowingly, right? So what I'll do now is, the plan here was to show a video. Let's see if it works. If not, it's okay. So what was going to be shown in the video was EATON authorities working with Chinese authorities, where they went to a very small manufacturing plant in a province in China, where people were manufacturing enclosures for certain types of breakers, not only for EATON, but for our competitors as well. And the thing is that they weren't using any type of high technology. They weren't using any equipment that would adhere by code. Also, these breakers do not adhere by code. So the video kind of just summarizes what is currently happening, not only in Southeast Asia, but probably in other parts of the world. So sadly, the video does not work, but in the synopsis of it is, these authorities working together, catching these small shops where they manufacture these breakers, and ultimately taking them to the authorities in China, and then getting them to resolve the case. So in the next slide, we'll be talking now is the threats to the market, so both financial impact and the dangers that are associated with this. And I'm going to ask Matt to put the poll question up. So how much counterfeiting of well-known brands, including EATON, occurs on average on a yearly basis? And you've got 4 options. One is correct. So take your time and take the poll.
Give it 5 more seconds for the poll. Get your answers in.
There is no reward, but it's good knowledge to know.
I'm going to end the poll now.
So it's not a tricky question, but it's the correct one would be the range. It's from 200 to 250 billion. So that's the range that we found on average, that on a yearly basis we see counterfeiting occurring. So even if you selected 200 billion, I think I'll let you slide and you'll get an A in my test. So, but also, did you know that that the value of this estimated counterfeiting is actually close to $2 trillion, and that is a very, very big number when we're talking about counterfeiting. So that sector exists and it's out there. And I want to make sure of those listening that, we have to bring awareness towards counterfeiting and make sure that we're doing everything ethically and correct. Also in the US, the estimated value of counterfeiting per the poll question is 200 billion to 250 billion. So the worst part about this is, by having all these losses in revenue, jobs are lost in the process. And as you can see, there's about 750,000 jobs that are lost annually in the US directly correlated to counterfeits or counterfeiting manufacturing. But what I really want to focus on is, why is this such a big growing problem? And one, I think consumers are being driven by bargain price knockoffs. Second, I think counterfeits aren't understood fully yet. And I believe from what we're seeing is that e-commerce is a enabler of illicit manufacturing. So when you're purchasing items online, you do run a high risk of potentially purchasing something that's either counterfeit or something that got refurbished, and you may not know about that. And the worst part about that is that there's no laws against that. Just like in the last bullet point, right? Laws don't exist in many countries and lack the enforcement of so. But what's the danger? Well, counterfeits are very difficult to detect and are extremely dangerous. And what we've come to realize is that as time progresses, these guys are getting very good at their craft, how I mentioned previously. So they're catching up to what manufacturers may be doing, so they can replicate that when they're doing the counterfeits. Like I mentioned before, these counterfeits are assembled with refurbished internal parts, but they don't meet OEM specifications. But most importantly, it poses a huge risk for personal safety, your equipment, your loss of production, which will be your downtime, and due to failures. But I really want to highlight that personal safety is very important, and purchasing a counterfeit breaker will run a high risk for someone that might be servicing the breaker, and might trip at an incorrect voltage and something could happen. So on my next slide, we'll be talking about pathways to the market. So from going to the manufacturer to an EATON authorized distributor, and then the end user. But before we go there, we were supposed to have this breaker video, and if it's a 40-second video, but if you look at the video, it says 1,000 volts and 14K rated, right? So this is a mining circuit breaker, so it has a very high rating. And this breaker, it was actually tested in the EATON facility, and it was known to be a counterfeit EATON breaker. So it was labeled at 1,000 volts and 14K. So we went ahead and tested it, and it's a very cool video. It sucks that it does not work, but what happened is as soon as they turned that breaker, it created a short circuit and the whole thing exploded. So there's a lot of flames, and the most dangerous part is if you're servicing this and you think it's it's going to take the voltage and it has a rating, you're working on the breaker or servicing it, you might end up being hurt. You might have some third-degree burns or whatever the case may be, and it's very dangerous. So on the next slide, what we'll be talking about is the whole transition or pathways to the market. So as I mentioned before, when you're going through an authorized distributor channel, you're getting an authentic breaker. So we manufacture it, labeled correctly, and then it is shipped to one of our authorized distributors, which they have the stock of inventory. Thus, once the contractor or end user comes around and they need a breaker for a project or somewhere where they need to service, they have the capabilities to do so with an authentic breaker. So, purchasing from an authorized distributor ensures that the product is new, genuine and fully warranted, which is very important also. But you know, it comes direct from the manufacturer. And when we're talking about non-authorized channels, you can see how there's kind of 3 arrows pointing to the unauthorized resellers. So you're talking about surplus, you're talking about counterfeit, tampered with, altered, used. So surplus comes from that example I gave earlier in the discussion where, you know, someone went ahead, got breakers from let's say a hurricane or a flood. They refurbished it, they labeled it new, they call you and they're like, hey, we've got this surplus, would you like to get this inventory? Then you've got the counterfeits, for example, that comes out from China, or you don't know where it's coming from. And then they call you and say, hey, look, XYZ, we have a very good competitive aggressive price. Here are the breakers. But, you know, the sources are unverified and undocumented. So resellers buy and sell from and through each other. And there's no commercial relationship that exists between the manufacturer as well when you're an unauthorized reseller or some of these breaker brokers. But you know, it's very important to make sure that the product that you're getting is an authentic product and it comes directly from the manufacturer, and in this case, EATON. So in the next slide, or what we'll be talking about now, is spotting the fakes or coming across what an authentic breaker is and how you can defer those. But before we do, I want to see if you guys can, if Matt can help me put up the poll and see if anyone knows how to spot a fake versus a counterfeit.
Eric, the poll has been launched.
Perfect.
Please take the next 15 seconds or so to answer. All right, Eric, I am going to close the poll now.
Perfect. Awesome. And that's why we're here, right? So my goal and the overarching objective of this presentation is to inform everyone that's in this call about what our objective is with Power Authenticity, how to differentiate a fake counterfeit to what an authentic breaker is. But I do want to note, I did skip a slide, which I'm going to just back up just a little bit. And I'm going to touch on the NEC code. That way we're in line with when it comes to refurbishing breakers. So it'll be a quick, let's see. So when we're talking about the 2020 NEC code and about reconditioning, if you look at the left side, there's three bulleted. There's three, right? There's the molded case circuit breaker shall not be permitted to be reconditioned. 2, low and medium voltage power circuit breakers shall be permitted to be reconditioned. And 3, high voltage circuit breakers shall be permitted. Now, if you look at the right, it says reconditioned equipment. And on the right, you're talking about if the reconditioned equipment, it should be listed as reconditioned. And the original listing marks should be removed. And not to make this a little bit longer, but what happens is when it's being reconditioned, sometimes the original listing mark is not removed. So that's a huge red flag. So that will transition into us. This will transition us into what a fake counterfeit or an authentic breaker will look like. So you might ask yourself, are these products new? And they all look like they're in perfect condition. I mean, all these boxes look pretty neat, but if you receive a shipment with EATON breakers, they should all come in the same type of packaging. So that's the number one. Two, if you receive any packaging that comes open or slightly a little bit wonky, that's a big, huge red flag, and you should pay attention to that as well, because that could be a sign of a counterfeit. Now, these are the 5 breakers that were in these packaging, and you probably won't be able to see it, but there's usually a labeling that we put on these breakers that showcase when these breakers were manufactured. And the question was along the lines, if you could see the date it was manufactured, but I think the picture is just so small that it's not reflective. So the difference from these 5 breakers is the date code and the country of origin. So there are a couple causes of concern if you end up purchasing a breaker through an authorized distributor or a breaker broker to get a breaker. And one huge concern is a breaker should not be wrapped in plastic. It usually comes in its carton, so that's a huge red flag that you should pay attention to. Another one is the critical date code. You have to make sure that breaker, when it gets shipped, it has that critical date code. And I believe that the date code should be around, it's either printed here, but it's clearly stated as a 2-digit year, a 2-digit month, and 2-digit day. So you'll be able to see that and then recognize that's either a fake or a real or an authentic EATON breaker. Also, we've got a very neat tool, which is the Power Edge tool, and it's compatible with iOS and Google. And what you can do is that you can scan the breaker, and then what it'll do is that it'll tell you if it's authentic or not. So that's a pretty neat feature that we have, and you can download that on your phone right now if you like to. And for example, this breaker right here, it was confirmed to be a 65K breaker, but it was relabeled to be 100K. So it's just, there's a couple things that you have to keep aware of, right? So like if you see that the rating of the breaker says something compared to what the packaging says, that's a huge red flag as well. So Matt, if you can help me put out the third poll question to see if, so if you had to choose a counterfeit based on the packaging, which one is a counterfeit breaker?
All right, Eric, the poll is launched. We'll give our participants about 15 seconds to answer.
Thank you.
Couple more moments. If you want to get your answers in.
Thanks, Matt.
And Eric, I'm closing the poll.
You got it. It does matter. It really does. And if you chose Cutler Hammer, that is the incorrect one. So this is why packaging is important. Even though Cutler Hammer is under the umbrella of EATON, EATON purchased Cutler Hammer years ago. But when we're talking about packaging, we ship everything that has to do with EATON's molded case circuit breakers with the packaging that you see on the left. So it's very deceptive because some people know us as Cutler Hammer, but when we're talking about molded case circuit breakers, we ship our molded case circuit breakers with the packaging that says EATON. So something that looks along the lines of what you're seeing on the left side. And I really want to make sure, after I talk about the differences of a counterfeit or what a circuit breaker or an authentic EATON circuit breaker looks like compared to a counterfeit, which we just looked at. I'm going to talk about a couple of things that you can write down and just keep in the back of your head when you're looking at one of these circuit breakers. Okay, like these are red flags that you can look at when you're purchasing a circuit breaker. So when I was talking about the dates and the labeling, I was really talking about these numbers you see here. So in the initial picture that I had sent of the 5 circuit breakers, one did not have the printing of when it was manufactured. So when you have a counterfeit, you have to make sure that you look at the labeling that's on the carton, that's on the packaging. Then you have to look at the labeling that's on the breaker itself. And then there's a labeling that's on the side of the breaker that you also have to pay attention to. And if those 3 do not match, then that's a huge red flag, and you automatically know that that breaker is a counterfeit breaker. And for example, this breaker was actually manufactured 2010, 12, 17. So this right here is the year it was manufactured. It says 2015. This would be the month. Sorry about that. The 2 following digits would be the month, and then the last 2 digits would be the date. And clearly it does not match to when it was manufactured. So that's another key thing that you can look at when you're looking at a counterfeit to what an authentic breaker is. So this right here is an example of an authentic EATON breaker. So one thing that you can notice is there's a laser edge printing on the breaker, and that's one thing that you can look at and know that that could be authentic. Now, the thing is, what we're hearing and what we're seeing is that some of these guys are getting very shifty in their craft, and they're actually doing these imprints on the breaker now. But this is one. Then if you look at the, sorry about that. And then if you look at the date code, is the labeling as well, and then being assembled in Dominican Republic. So before I move on to the next slide, I want to just finalize on, like I mentioned before, a couple things that you can look at to differentiate a authentic breaker to a counterfeit. So one, labeling. So the country of origin. We do manufacture these circuit breakers in Dominican Republic and in Beaver, Pennsylvania. Now, in Beaver, Pennsylvania, we only manufacture breakers that are 600 amps and above. And then in Dominican Republic, anything that's below. So if you see a discrepancy there, if you get a breaker that says made in Dominican Republic, but the amperage is 600 above, that's a big red flag. The brand name, just how we went over that, it's when you're looking at packaging, it has to say EATON and not Cutler Hammer. We don't do plastic, it's always cardboard. I think the next one should be, there should always be a date code on the back of the physical breaker and on the front label, how we saw before. So those were a couple of things I want to touch upon at the end of how to decipher what's a counter and an authentic. That way you can just kind of have that written down in your brain, or you just have that in your memory. That way in the near future, when you come across an opportunity, you kind of know the differences between a counterfeit and authentic breaker. So how do we fight back, right? And how do we go about this? Well, we fight it back with the power of authenticity. And that's a huge initiative that EATON is pushing, and we've been pushing is, purchase from an authentic manufacturing company. Don't get it from a breaker broke. Well, don't get it from these unauthorized distributors and resellers. So, and with the power of authenticity, our goal is to improve engagement and distributor support by, providing increased stocking levels and safety stock at EATON. Also, by enabling our users with tools and the sales aids like today's presentation to educate and inform the dangers of sourcing products from the gray market. And when you have competitive pricing plus product availability, end goal should be success. And following up on, I mentioned earlier about an app that we have, and it's called the Power Edge app, which is compatible with iOS and Android devices, but it only takes up to 400 amp circuit breakers. So what you can do is that you can scan the QR code that's on the breaker, and it'll automatically tell you if it's an authentic breaker or if it's a suspect. I think it will actually tell you suspect breaker. Another cool way that you can go about it is you can use a link below where it says poweredge.eaton.com. And once you go in there, what you have to, this is compatible with laptops and computers. What you'll do is that you'll be able to use, select from the style number, catalog number, QPC code, or the EAN number. So like I was mentioning before, you take a scan of this breaker and it's either going to tell you this is a very authentic breaker or it's a suspect breaker. So that's when you got to raise eyebrows and start asking yourself what's going on. And, some of our industry organizations and publications that help us drive this this initiative are, Electrical Safety Foundation, ESFI. You've got National Electrical Manufacturers Association, or NEMA, or ECM, are just a few of these partners that we work with to push the message, and lead with the initiative as well. And it's a great resource to have those guys. And then, ultimately, it's your call to action. So, if we're looking at the left side, the top left corner, always buy authentic product. We encourage our end users to go through an authorized distributor and purchase a product that comes directly from the manufacturer instead of a reseller that you may not know where they're getting their product. Like I mentioned before, they might be refurbishing it. They might be getting counterfeits from other parts of the world. They might be fixing them up somewhere in someone's basement where they're putting in new components in the inside and then just labeling it as new and it's been used, or it's something else that's gone on with it. On the bottom left corner, protect yourself from the gray market. So with this initiative, we're trying to enable our users to understand that, there's this huge power in the knowledge of knowing that the differences between a counterfeit and what an authentic breaker is. Like I said, don't let your guard down. It puts you, your employees, customers, and business at risk of injury or liability, but it's really important to make sure that, everyone is aware that, there's a huge risk out there by you purchasing a counterfeit breaker or a retrofitted breaker, whatever the case may be. At the top right, don't be fooled by products that's being represented as new. Our intention is to make sure that we supply our authorized distributors. That way the end customers can have an authentic product rather coming from an unreliable source, coming from a surplus, if you want to call it. And, it's just don't get fooled by what you see, and being informed also will help you make smarter decisions that will help your business and your personal livelihood. And then finally, authenticate your product. So, we've got these tools that enable the user, enables the seller, enables a buyer if it's an authentic breaker, you make sure that what you're buying is authentic, it's real, straight from the manufacturing company. It's not refurbished. It's not coming from somewhere else that you don't know. So, we're providing all this information out that way. You're prepared with ammunition. That way you don't get blindsided by having a fake or something go wrong when you're servicing a job. So ultimately, I hope this presentation gave you a little bit of insight of power of authenticity, what our goal is, and being aware that yes, you can, if you did not know the differences, hopefully this kind of gave you a little idea of like, okay, now I know what the differences are. And then you start raising questions. Where did you get this from? So it's always good to ask questions, and it's always good to have this type of knowledge. I hope you learned a little bit from today. I hope these questions I did not try to trick you. But in my eyes, you guys did great. I appreciate you participating. I think we still have enough time. If there's any more questions, go ahead and put those out there.
Thank you, Eric. Great job. Great job with the presentation. This is Eric's first presentation with the EAP, so thank you. You rolled with it, certainly with the videos, and I think you did a great job as well.
I try to reenact them.
You did, and I think you did a great job. And I can tell you, I certainly learned quite a bit about how to spot the difference. So I think you were successful. Matt, it looks like we do have a question coming in. I can certainly field it here if you'd like. Okay. So, hey, John, thanks for submitting a question. John's asking, how can I tell if an online reseller is selling legitimate products?
That is a good question. And the best way how to go about that is reaching out to an EATON sales representative, because we actually have a master list of who is authorized to sell. So I know that online you can buy multiple EATON products, but one, you don't know if it's authentic. Two, you don't know if it's been hampered with. So the best way to go about that is just contact your local EATON rep, and then they'll be able to help you out. You can reach out to me. I can help you out. So the resources are there. I do know that we have a master spreadsheet of who these players are, who not to go to, and who's authorized. So I think that's the best way how to go about that. Good question, though.
Great. And Eric, I imagine, that if it's too good to be true in terms of pricing, it probably is. Like, things to kind of think about. Not that it's always about price, but if you're getting a really good deal, it sounds like you need to ask some questions. Oh,
absolutely. And a good thing about power of authenticity is, our authorized distributors have a pricing agreement with EATON, and we offer competitive levels for these types of breakers. So we're trying to circumvent the gray market, and we're competing against the gray market. So we're aware of that, and our team has worked with these breakers to a point where they kind of know where the levels should be at. So, but to your point, if it's too good to be true, you got to raise some questions.
It probably is. Well, and I think, as we can all imagine, Billows, of course, is an authorized distributor of EATON products. So by all means, reach out to your local representative, either at Billows. We'll send Eric's contact information out as well if there's additional questions, or if you'd like to see a list of authorized distributors, I'm sure Eric would be able to follow up with that as well.
Yeah.
So with that, I don't see any more questions that have come through the chat, but I think this was a great discussion, and I think that you've succeeded in teaching everyone how to go about spotting some counterfeits and really raising awareness. So thank you, Eric.
Oh, no, thank you. And yeah, please go to Billows and tell him that Eric sent you and tell him that you need a breaker through POA, and we'll make it happen.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy St. Patty's Day. It's a little gloomy out there, but hopefully everyone will enjoy a little bit of green beer. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.